Hello, I'm Herman Middleton and welcome back to You Are Not a Machine. In an earlier video, I introduced you to the great academic and cultural critic Neil Postman, who coined the term media ecology and who founded the media ecology program at NYU. The second Neil Postman quote we're going to look at is also from his best-known work, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. Here's the quote. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture, preoccupied with some equivalent of the feelies, the orgy-porgy, and the centrifugal bumble puppy. It's remarkable that Postman published this in 1985. Already, long before the rise of the internet, television was realizing Huxley's fears. It's even more remarkable that Huxley had these fears in 1932. Long before the real rise of television. It's clear now, with the rise of the internet, that Huxley's fears have been largely realized. But first, let's look at Orwell's fears, which have largely not been realized. Orwell feared that authoritarian governments would ban books, that we would therefore be deprived of information, and that the truth would be actively hidden from us. Ultimately, Orwell's fear was that we would become a captive culture controlled by an authoritarian regime. While some of Orwell's fears have come to pass, in particular truth being hidden, it is not for the reasons that he feared. It is instead Huxley's fears that have more or less all come true, that people would lose interest in reading, making book bans unnecessary, that information overload would lead us to passivity and egoism, and that truth would be buried in irrelevant information, and ultimately that we would become a trivial culture obsessed with superficial entertainment. It would seem that the rise in popularity of platforms such as TikTok mark a low point for our culture and do not bode well for the future. So what can we do? Again, as always, real change begins with each of us, and in order to push back against the triviality of our culture, we need to become more serious. One way we can do this is to spend a lot less time on TikTok or Instagram or whatever our social media platform of choice, and a lot more time reading long and challenging books, and then interacting with people, ideally in the real world, to discuss these books. Speaking of which, if you haven't already downloaded the How Did We Get Here reading list, now is a great time to do that. If you were to read every book on that reading list, I can pretty much guarantee you that you would see the world in a very different way. As always, you can find the link to the reading list below this video, and I will see you again soon.